A mother from Bristol has been joined by a former Olympic swimmer to highlight the mental stress children can face when competing in the sport. Andrea Brown says she's seen firsthand how some youngsters struggle with the pressure. Tracy Miller has been to meet them.
Hours spent training for that next competition. These young swimmers are highly competitive, but Soundwell Swimming Club are taking their mental health very seriously. They're part of a new campaign that's been launched by this mum after she saw children in real distress when competing.
I think I've just seen too much of children struggling, children visibly having anxiety, nerves, throwing up, poolside, and thought, surely there's something that we can do about this. It really turns out that unless you learn those skills, unless you exercise your brain as a muscle the same way that we exercise all our other muscles, you just simply don't build that skill set.
So here is Gemma Lowe, the 18-year-old.
Swimming at the highest level, Gemma Lowe represented Team GB in 2 Olympics, but her experience of competition anxiety, even in the early years, sounds shockingly familiar.
I got nervous, really nervous before competition, because I always just wanted to do well. Throw up behind the starting blocks. It isn't nice, but then I think because I actually swam well in the race and did well, everyone just thought, oh well, she's fine.
Gemma suffered throughout her career. Even at international level, mental support and training was severely lacking.
We actually train 100% physical, there's no actually mental training, so that's a bit worrying. At competition day, you're saying it's 90% mental. It's like, well, we haven't trained anything like mentally with the brain to get us race ready.
At race competitions, Jack has seen some of his fellow swimmers struggling.
And they can really get to them before a race, and even if they are a lot quicker in training, yeah, it's quite upsetting, especially when I know they've worked months just to get where they are now.
There's some terrific swimmers who, and not just swimmers, but athletes from all sports who would go further and enjoy the sport more had they been given more support.
Andrea hopes her campaign will lead to sports clubs taking the mental welfare of children as seriously as their physical achievements. Tracy Miller, BBC Points West, Bristol.
That's really interesting, isn't it? And joining us is Jake Brown, a sports psychologist who's often called when mental health has hit crisis points. Thanks very much indeed for coming on, Jake. What sort of issues do you see?
I think like was mentioned in the piece there, the majority of issues that we deal with are performance anxiety. Now, this is something that is incredibly common in all sports, especially in youngsters as well, but it's absolutely crippling for performance. It doesn't so much matter about the enormity of the event, it ultimately comes down to an individual's perception, and even if it's a small competition, a local meet, what you see is these young individuals still have this extreme nervous response to this anxiety, and it's, like I said, debilitating not only to their performance but their enjoyment of the sport.
So what can we do perhaps as parents to try and alleviate that if we've got a youngster who's talented?
Yeah, it's a difficult one as parents because teenagers don't always want to be that open in front of their parents, but I do think it's important to have open conversations, to ask them how they're getting on, to speak about these issues and normalise them a lot more. I think ultimately some responsibility lies with the club. You know, we spend hours on physical training in the gym, personal training, but we widely recognise the mental side of sport as one of the most important aspects, yet very little is actually done about it. So I do think, you know, as parents, as clubs, they should have some responsibility to check in on the well-being of their athletes, to see how they are coping mentally and provide support where it's needed.
Yeah, but Jake, you were talking about high performers there, but I guess it's throughout sport, isn't it? Whatever level that you're at, that you get disappointment. But the whole point of sport is that you hope to succeed, you learn defeat, you learn to listen to the referee, and you learn to obey rules, and that is quite mentally tough, but it prepares you for life.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, a lot of the tools that we coach and teach individuals with sports psychology relate to wider aspects of life, you know, dealing with setbacks, dealing with disappointment, dealing with failures, dealing with your thoughts. Fundamentally, these are skills that you're going to have to rely on in other aspects of your life, and I think sport is a great medium to access these skills through.
Do you think sometimes, just very briefly, but I know lots of children who've been picked by various scouts and they get all excited, and then inevitably, usually it comes to nothing.
Yeah, the world of sport is brutal, it's very cutthroat, and I do think that people should take a more proactive or even preventative approach when it comes to sports psychology, rather than it being a reactive last-ditch attempt when something goes wrong.
Okay, Jake, very interesting to talk to you. Very hard. I've never got picked for a team. That was my problem, but I'll come to you with that another day. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. Thank you.